Australian politics doesn't quite run on the scale of US politics, or in more recent times, on its sometimes bizarre level. But in Adelaide on the weekend, we saw a clear step up in the pace of political campaigning, even though our election is still up to 7 months away.
When we look at the economy today, we can see new reasons for optimism and new proof that the worst is behind us. Together, we have faced a global storm, and we've navigated it in the Australian way, the Labor way. And it's why we're so determined to win the election next year.
All year, the Albanese government has struggled to find clear air to sell its message. Peter Dutton's coalition has been deadly effective at keeping the focus on issues like immigration. In recent weeks, it's been issues like the PM's decision to buy a $4.3 million house and questions about flight upgrades and too close relationships with airlines that have been robbing the government of oxygen.
He was Transport Minister and he picked the phone up to the CEO of Qantas to get upgrades, some of which it seems were declared and others not. Certainly on the face of reading the Gillard Government Ministerial Code of Conduct, the Prime Minister has breached that by his own admission.
It's largely been left to the independents on the crossbench to pursue this story, and calls for greater clarity about the Code of Conduct because both major parties have checkered records.
Major airlines don't offer these things for no reason. They're not stupid. They think that there's something in it for them, and I think Australians have that concern as well.
While the government certainly needed to change the political focus, there were two things about Sunday's Labor rally in Adelaide which made it more than just an exercise in changing the conversation. The first was a significant shift in rhetoric about inflation, which would appear to put the government's message at odds with the Reserve Bank.
When we came to government, annual inflation had a 6 in front of it and was rising. Now it has a 2 in front of it and is falling. Our responsible economic management has brought inflation down to its lowest level in almost 4 years.
The second was a significant policy announcement about HECS debt. The HECS, or help system, has been badly in need of an overhaul for some time.
The system's in a bit of a mess. There are a couple of big problems. One is that the prices basically are wrong. In 2020, the former government changed the prices by field of study quite radically. Humanities prices more than doubled. Some of the STEM prices fell. There was no good reason for this, and it was essentially inequitable. The other point is that the first income threshold of repayment, which is currently around $54,000 per year, is miles too low. The original first repayment income threshold was, in current dollars, about $85,000 a year.
The government has announced a new body to review the relative prices of degrees, though just when those fees will change is not yet clear. And on Sunday it announced a lift in that income threshold for repayments to $67,000. But there was a further announcement on Sunday that was clearly designed to not just provide cost of living relief to young people, but lure their vote and challenge the Greens pitch to younger voters.
A re-elected Labor government will take 20% off student debt for everyone who has one. It will be the first piece of legislation that we bring into the next Parliament.
There is absolutely no reason to wait till July next year after the election to provide much-needed student debt relief. Labor is in government. Labor can make this change right now.
This isn't real reform. This doesn't change the student fees that somebody who starts uni next year pays. This is simply a cash splash from Anthony Albanese.
The government's HECS move reinforces the centrality of the cost of living issue. The government is certainly now emphasising that the headline inflation rate has, quote, a 2 in front of it. But an underlying inflation rate that is still at 3.5% means that it's still not enough for the Reserve Bank to consider cutting rates. That looks like a clear conflict in position between the government and the RBA.
No, I don't think we're at odds. I think we're talking about slightly different things. So it's true that the economy is not growing, and we know that in per capita terms it is declining and consumption per capita is declining. I think that's what the government is getting at, in addition to which I think they're focusing on what's happening with private demand, which is particularly weak.
Parliament is meeting for its third last week of the year, and the Senate is holding estimates hearings investigating everything from terror threats to defence contracts. Today, the ABC was under scrutiny, particularly over the findings of an independent report by former ABC executive Alan Sunderland into how extra gunshots had been edited into a version of a 2022 story on 7:30 about the actions of Australian troops in Afghanistan in 2012.
The errors identified in the interim report should not have occurred, and we apologise for them. The ABC accepts Mr Sunderland's findings and is committed to implementing the recommendations.
Mr Sunderland says, quote, "To be clear, I find no evidence that anybody at any stage made a conscious or deliberate decision to introduce additional gunshots. It appears to be an inadvertent consequence of attempts to create clean, accurate and effective sequences in the story." He goes on to say, "I've found no evidence to support the conclusion that any of this was done at the direction of the journalists involved or on the initiative of the video editor in order to doctor or deliberately distort the depiction of the events that occurred."
Whether it's estimates, the Parliament or the cost of living in Australia, the US election hangs over everything in Australian politics, as it does globally.
Be it President Harris or President Trump, we're really confident that firstly the alliance will be in good shape, but that our critical equities within the alliance will also be maintained.
The outcome in the US will not just have policy implications, but will send important signals around the world on how we all conduct our politics in the future.